Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I hope you're all doing well, inshallah. So, welcome to it's our third podcast, right?
Yes.
Of the LOK channel and Brother Ashik's channel as well, where we're going to be discussing a variety of topics to do with Islam, other comparative religions, and the like. And for today, we've decided the main focus of this episode, for episode 3, will be on kind of giving the context behind the Roman Empire prior to Christianity, the gods and goddesses that were worshipped in that region, also gods and goddesses that are relevant worshipped in surrounding regions, and kind of painting that context for the world in which Christianity arose. So I'd like to introduce my brothers here. We've got Brother Raihan.
Assalamu alaikum.
And Idriss.
Assalamu alaikum.
And did you guys want to touch on anything before we go right into it? Or
I think it would be good if we start off with an overview.
Yeah.
And what is the purpose of discussing about this topic, and why is it important or relevant for Muslims and Christians to know about it, inshallah.
Yeah. Did you want to give a bit of an outline there in terms of there was a Quranic ayah that really touched you, right, in this area, and helped with your investigation into this?
Yeah, subhanallah. Yeah. So when I was reading the Quran, there was one ayah that I came across that really made me investigate into the origins of Christianity. And this ayah can be found in Surah At-Tawbah, in Surah number 9, ayah number 30. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقالت اليهود عزير ابن الله وقالت النصارى المسيح ابن الله ذلك قولهم بأفواههم يضاهئون قول الذين كفروا من قبل. So the meaning is, the Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, while the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. That is the words that are coming out of their mouths. They only imitate the disbelievers of old. Now what I find beneficial from this ayah is, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting not all Christians, but the predominant Christians who say that the Messiah is the son of Allah in the sense of a Greco Roman sense, in a literal sense, a'udhu billah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has begotten a son. And Allah Azza wa Jal, he then highlights where did they get this statement from, or who are they imitating. And it's very interesting. Allah says ذَلِكَ قَوْلُهُمْ يُضَاهِئُونَ قَوْلَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ قَبْلِ. That they're only imitating the disbeliefs of old. So their statement is just following the tradition, the culture of previous polytheistic religions like the Greeks, the Romans, even the Hindus, Babylonians, Mesopotamian, etc. So I looked into this, and I'm thinking, wow, this is quite amazing. So I looked into the origin of Christianity, and I found many, even from the church writings, there were many nemesis of opponents accusing Christianity of borrowing from paganistic cultures. So if I'm not mistaken, I think Celsus was one of them. I think Celsus, he was one of the forefront of demonstrating that the religion of Christianity is borrowing from paganistic cultures, and the church fathers had to refute them. I believe it was Origen, the church father. He had to engage, and the brothers, inshallah ta'ala, they're going to bring references even from church fathers that had to refute their opponents of accusation of borrowing from paganistic cultures. So that really, this ayah really blew my mind.
Yeah, no, and also when you mentioned it as well, I really awoke that interest in me as well in researching down this pathway, rather than going a lot into their biblical scriptures and learning that in really depth, because this kind of historical approach really appealed to me.
And also, Saint Jerome, who was a very famous 5th century church father, respected by, I believe, the Orthodox and the Catholics. He stated that the Trinity was believed by the late antiquity nations. So meaning that even in paganistic nations, they had their own concept of Trinity.
Yeah,
And I think
you
we'll
mentioned
continue.
before, like the Trimurti, even in all the way down to India and the Vedic region, they had their own version of the Trinity. As you're mentioning, prior to Christianity, there was this kind of thinking there in the Jewish diaspora, where they had an idea of like the Logos, and that was starting to take shape.
Yes,
But yeah,
correct.
no, it's really interesting. Barakallahu feek.
Well, yeah.
So I really like the point you mentioned there about just emphasizing the fact that they're repeating what their forefathers did prior to them. And it's very interesting that it's important to understand the context of like the Roman Empire and what was going on with the religions there. So, for example, their dynasties, whenever they arose, they needed to justify why they're in power and why they've been given that divine rule to rule over all these various regions. So forming a religious cult in a way was very important to Roman statecraft. Emperors, they really did focus in on the religion of the time. It wasn't like the modern day where the rulers are really separated from the theology of their regions. They were really focused in on that.
Oh, so like the state and religion wasn't separate.
Yeah, it wasn't separate. It wasn't separate. So like they really focused in on the cults they were born into by birth, and by effect of that, the people that are under them in the imperial court, so the people that are working with the emperor and in the
Yes.
family of the emperor, they would often have motivation to promote the religion that the emperor is following.
Right.
So it was something that was really institutionalized in their system. An example of this, prior to the period we're going to kind of focus in on, was Augustus, the Emperor Augustus, and his court. They actually commissioned a composition by a person called Virgil, who created this Aeneid. And what this is, it's widely regarded as one of the greatest works in Latin, and it tells the story of a figure called Aeneas, a character from the Iliad. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of him, yeah.
He becomes the ancestor of the Romans, and he was a hero already known in like myths in that region. But what Virgil does when he was commissioned by Augustus was he started collecting all these stories of Aeneas's wanderings, like his associations with Rome, like all these stories that were around his like association with Rome, his descriptions, and then like composing that into a compelling founding myth, an epic that tied Rome to the legacies of Troy
Wow.
from the
okay.
Iliad,
Yeah.
explained the Punic Wars, because Troy is associated with the Punic Wars.
Yes.
So explained that, glorified Roman virtues of why Rome is the greatest,
Wow.
and legitimized the Judeo-Claudian dynasty that Augustus was a member of.
Could you explain what the Judeo-Claudian dynasty is?
Yeah, so
Briefly,
if
yeah.
I'm remembering correctly, it's like kind of the emperors have a dynasty. So when an emperor gets into power, they justify their rule through what I described, and then their successors, so they're like family members that take over them, are
Right.
part of the same dynasty.
So is it like similar to like Herodian dynasty?
Yeah. So Herodian dynasty, and like like everyone in the Herodian dynasty is someone who's a family member
Yes.
from him or like very closely allied. So it's kind of a similar thing. So what was happening in what Virgil did with the Aeneid, I hope I'm saying that right, but what he did is kind of like create this founding myth which explained like why Romans are the best, like gave the moral justification for it, tied Rome to previous legends
Right.
of Greece, like of Troy, explained the wars that were going on at the time, the Punic Wars, and legitimized the dynasty, why the Judeo-Claudian dynasty is in power.
Wow.
And I'm saying, like, why is it so far-fetched that the same thing is happening with the Gospels, which is literally the next dynasty coming in? That the newly established Flavian dynasty, they promote materials floating around about Isa alayhi salam, the same way like Aeneas's material was floating around. They forge a compelling myth and epic to like kind of, try and shape purpose for the Roman Empire. They tie Rome to the legends of what was happening in Palestine, just like the Aeneas stories did for the regions of Greece.
Right.
And also explain the Jewish revolt, what was going on in the Jewish revolt, and justify what happened after that. The same way Virgil did with the Aeneas stories, where he explained the Punic Wars.
Wow.
So you see, like there's a lot of reasons why the same thing would occur if this is a standard practice that dynasties did whenever they took over in the Roman Empire.
So in other words, the Romans used existing stories,
Yeah.
but they molded it into their narrative. Is that accurate
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say?
yeah. I'm saying potentially, Allahu Alam, but like that is standard practice by what Romans did.
Right.
And even if they weren't commissioning those stories, promoting those stories to try and like emphasize Roman virtue and character and towards forming an epic
So
and story.
embody it into the Roman culture tradition, but using a historical figure,
Yeah.
and that's what they did with Isa alayhi salam,
And they did with Aeneas.
and they did with Aeneas
Prior
as
to
well.
that.
And that's subhanallah. It just goes back to the ayah of the Quran. They're only imitating the disbelievers of old, and subhanallah.
Yeah, so like the story of Aeneas is, often like when Christians approach us and they say, how can like this be a whole thing where, they're shifting the whole message of Isa alayhi salam? Well,
Yeah.
they did that with Aeneas. They kind of forged all these compelling myths that were
Yes.
lying around, these like potential ties to Greece, this, that, the other, and then they turned this Greek figure like into
A Roman figure.
a Roman figure.
Right. And they did the same with Isa alayhi salam.
Yeah.
From a Palestinian Jewish figure
Yeah.
into a Roman sympathizer.
Yeah, yeah. And this is not like, I'm not talking about like hundreds of years later. This is this is dynasties that are right next to each other. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
100%.
So brother, did you guys want to touch on anything else?
No, I'm just listening.
No, it's fine. And then so that kind of paints the importance of the imperial court and the aristocracy and how powerful they are, that they can actually shift entire purposes of their society. What's important to also notice is there was an internal spiritual conflict going on at the time where the Gospels were being written.
Mhm.
So, like I mentioned, the imperial court, it's a group of people living and operating under the emperor around the imperial palace.
Yeah.
And people, when they often think of like paganistic religions, they often don't delve into it a bit more and think about, they often just kind of see all these gods in the pantheon and goddesses in the pantheon and they put them all on equal weighting.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not often the case. Often the case in these empires, and paganistic empires in particular, there was situations where certain gods and goddesses were focused on for certain periods of history.
So I think the academics, they call it like localized gods,
Okay, well,
localized goddesses. Like
Yeah.
for example, if you look at in the Jewish history, you had I think it's El or Elor. He was the god of the northern kingdom of Israel. So the northern kingdom of Israel consisted of 10 tribes.
Yeah.
Then you have Yahweh, he was the main god for the southern kingdom of Israel, which consisted of 2 tribes. One of them is a Judah tribe, and they used to fought each other. They used to have civil wars.
Yeah.
So we see polytheism already crept into the Israelite history,
Yeah,
and they had their own localized gods.
yeah. That El was a Canaanite god
Sorry.
prior, wasn't it?
So yeah, you're right.
And then I think what you're talking about, which actually I
Elohim.
yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. In terms of the kind of polytheism, and you can still, as you know, you can still find like readings of this in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, where it recognizes the fact of there being a pantheon of gods
Yes.
that are legitimate,
Yes.
but their god is solely for them, which is called
Henotheism.
thank you.
Hellenism.
No, henotheism.
Henotheism.
Oh, henotheism.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So there's
So they have a main god, then they have lesser gods.
yeah,
So there's a hierarchical structure.
yeah, and some believe that there was an actual progression and transformation, that they believed in the pagan gods. They believed in one of the main pagan gods, El, which was also like Baal, and then through time they morphed into monotheism. And potentially what could have happened, potentially, this is just an opinion, is potentially, in terms of our belief, when they moved into that region, into the Levant, potentially some of them were contaminated with those pagan beliefs. And then, as you know, when they send prophets, they renew the monotheism. So maybe what scholarship is saying is basically a remnants of that journey that they had. That once Ibrahim alayhi salam moved into that, and his progeny, that some of them were tainted by the paganistic beliefs. And as we believe in relation to tahrif of the Torah, that could be a remnants of tahrif as well, that when scholarship says that, as we've said, there's that perception in their writings of them believing in the pantheon of gods. Saying the pantheon of gods is legitimate, they actually exist, but El or Yahweh is actually our God, only for us. And all of your gods, we accept that they do exist, and you have a right to believe in them. Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. And the same thing happened at the time of Isa alayhi salam as well.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a continuation.
So in terms of like just around that period of Isa alayhi salam and when his life would have been, there was a real focus on. There was a kind of a battle going on in the aristocracy between trying to focus on two gods and goddesses. So it was people who are more aligned to the god Jupiter, and then people who are more aligned to the goddess Minerva.
I was just about to mention that. Yeah.
So this is kind of like kind of the story of the first century in the Roman theology, on which one is gaining power in the Roman Empire and which one is not, and which one is being focused on more and which one's not. So just a bit of background about Jupiter.
Yes.
He was the chief Roman god, so he was known as the king of gods, and he was the god of sky and thunder.
Wow.
And that might sound quite familiar because it's the parallel to the Greek god Zeus. So often Greek gods did evolve into Roman gods.
Yeah.
So we talked about the Julio-Claudian dynasty. I kept saying Judeo-Claudian, but it's Julio-Claudian dynasty from Julius Caesar. And the last of the Julio-Claudian dynasty was the Emperor Nero, who's a very famous figure.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys want to touch on a little bit about Nero, or you might?
Do you want to touch on Nero?
No worries if not. But
Just that it said that he was a madman. He burnt down Rome, I believe, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know how true this is, but supposedly he did a lot of extreme or mass persecution of Christians.
Yes.
It's said.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And so the majority of that Julio-Claudian dynasty was heavily focusing on Jupiter as their main god that they're focusing in on. But Nero was actually the last of this dynasty, and he started to actually shift a bit away from that. So because he was such an eccentric, and he was really he thought of himself as a bit of a showman and a bit of a performer and into the arts, he really resonated with the son of Jupiter, who's called Apollo. Apollo, because he's the son of their supposed great god Jupiter, he was known as the son of God.
Yes.
And Apollo, he was the sun god as well. So not just being the son of God, he was also the god of the sun, the star. He was a lyre player, so that's an instrument. So Nero really liked him a lot and used to dress up as him during festivals that they used to have. And he was the patron of music, poetry, and the arts. So you can clearly see why Nero was shifting away from Jupiter to more of this focus on the sun and making Apollo his main god. So he often dressed as him, minted coins with Apollo on it, and you can really see the shift in the Julio-Claudian dynasty from the focus on Jupiter to the focus on his son, Apollo. Nero also showed interest in other solar deities like Sol and Helios.
Okay.
But yeah, as we'll talk about, this all starts to slowly, you can see there's this pathway going from the big god to the small son of God, and this is all kind of merging. So a lot of these deities will start merging. So you're already starting to see that shift. I think brother, you mentioned the Great Fire in 64 CE. Yep. Nero actually dedicated a huge sanctuary to Sol.
Yeah.
So he's really focusing in on this god Apollo and similar kind of gods like Sol. So when the Flavian dynasty took charge after Nero, so just to paint a bit of context on what happened, Nero passed away. There was this kind of free-for-all by these generals, Roman generals, and who's going to take over next, because the Julio-Claudian dynasty came to an end with Nero. And Vespasian actually ended up winning.
That's right.
and starting the Flavian dynasty. And one of the ways he legitimized that was by using Jewish prophecy, which we'll touch on, inshallah, in the
and
next.
what Josephus mentioned as well.
Yeah, in another
Very interesting.
podcast. But he also justified it through Apollo, because Vespasian's house's god that they used to focus on was Apollo, which was interesting. Just so in terms of Nero, he had actually commissioned a colossal statue of himself during his life. So he had a bit of an ego, as you guys mentioned, which was 100 to 120 feet high in his golden house. And then once Vespasian took over, he actually converted this giant statue of Nero into the god Apollo.
Yes.
So
I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, it's something that is showing that early on in the Julio-Claudian dynasty, there was a focus on Jupiter. Now Nero, because of its eccentricity, was moving to Apollo, and then the new dynasty that's coming in is even more focused on Apollo, and is even more pushing this push towards the god Apollo. So yeah, did you guys want to touch on anything there, or?
Yeah, I need to gather my thoughts. Well,
Yeah, no,
I was about to mention the capital. It's called the Capitoline Triad. So Juno,
Yeah.
Minerva, and what's the other one? We just mentioned it. Sorry, Juno, Minerva, and
I think I've got it here somewhere. No, I don't have the names, so I just got the
what's the other one? Wait, let me check. Oh, Jupiter. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Jupiter, Minerva, and Juno. They're known as the Capitoline Triad, and they were the three main deities worshipped by the Romans. And I need to verify, but that triad played a significant role after the Jewish revolt. Let me get that, inshallah.
Yeah,
I'll try
sure.
that, get
No worries.
inshallah,
So in terms of so we were talking about like how that the focus was shifting to Apollo, as the Roman Empire was progressing in the first century.
Yeah.
So you touched on the Jewish revolt there. That actually made the Flavian dynasty. So this dynasty, in the Flavian dynasty, we have Vespasian, Titus, his son, and Domitian, his younger son.
Yeah.
So especially when we're talking about the Flavian dynasty, we're often referring to the first two, Vespasian and Titus, those two emperors. And we talked about how they were already shifting depictions of Nero to Apollo, that their house god was Apollo. The Jewish revolt that was happening, they were actually the masterminds behind the defeat of the Jews in the Jewish revolt. And actually one way that they even strengthened the focus on Apollo through the Jewish revolt was actually centuries before, in the time of the Seleucids, there was a revolt by the Jews against the Seleucids in the same region. So in Palestine, there was a revolt by the Jews by Simon the Maccabean against the Seleucids.
Yeah.
And the Seleucids were a dynasty that succeeded to Alexander the Great, supposed great. But like, so this is a bit of a while before the context we're talking. But in the wartime, the Seleucid emperor, when he was fighting, the Seleucid king, when he was fighting the Jews, he commissioned coinage with 2 dolphins and an anchor and that's a symbol of Apollo. The 2 dolphins are the sacred animal of Apollo, and the anchor represents engagement rings associated with Apollo.
So it wasn't the cross that was the early symbolism of Christianity. It was the.
No, this is in really before the Roman Empire. I'm talking about like when there was a revolt.
Oh, sorry, I'm
against the Seleucids. When there was a revolt against the Seleucids, they were using Apollo imagery when they were at war with the Jews.
Oh, okay.
I remember we were speaking. I'm not going to mention the apologists and speakers call now.
Okay.
But you were discussing it.
Yeah.
And then I googled the image.
Yeah.
Of what you were talking about, and it just kind of proved the point you were making.
Yeah.
But in terms of imagery.
Yeah.
Because there's a crossover, isn't it, between that
and what was happening at Rome.
No, but in terms of symbolism, that and Christianity as well.
Yeah. Because this is like 150 BC. So this is way before, when this war was happening between the Seleucids and the Jews. And it was like the dolphin or the fish.
Yeah,
it's interchangeable, and the anchor.
Yeah. And the anchor, that was it.
Yeah.
And you were there. You just probably forgot. But
No,
we were all there.
But what's like shocking is that was being used as a symbol by the Seleucids, the Greeks, against when they were at war with the Jews. When the Flavian dynasty, so when Vespasian and Titus came into charge in the Roman Empire, and because they had been at war with the Jews and they're still at war with the Jews, they actually revived that symbol.
Right.
So they revived the Seleucid Greek symbol of Apollo, and they put it on their coins, and as imagery that they were using throughout the empire because they were at war with the Jews again. So it's kind of a repeating of history that back in the time of the Seleucid Greeks, when they were at war with the Jews, they were using Apollo imagery, and then when Vespasian and Titus come into power, like 100 years later in the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire now is at war with the Jews,
Yeah.
they bring the same imagery back.
Subhanallah.
So that, and what is the imagery? The imagery is of a son of God.
Yep.
And yeah, and what's interesting is, like the brother mentioned, this was also adopted by Christianity around the same time as one of their earlier symbols.
Yes. Yes.
So and imagery of Apollo and imagery of Jesus that they were using was indistinguishable for the first 4 centuries.
So when was the Roman cross symbol used for Christianity?
I think that, I mean, that there was use of that earlier, but it was never the main symbol that was used. Yeah, it was not like the you know how it's the main symbol that they put forward now. There was never that. That was never the case. It was always the fish or the dolphin and the anchor in the earlier stages of Christianity. I think the focus on the cross came way more after, like 400 years later in Constantine's time when he.
Right. So during Nicene Christianity.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we're
Roman
talking about
Christianity,
way
yeah.
before that. So yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, the Flavian dynasty, in the wake of the Jewish revolt, they readopted this ancient anchor, 2-dolphin Apollo symbol to highlight their heavy emphasis on Apollo. So we've just given throughout the podcast like why they're focusing in on Apollo, and this is another example of that.
Yes.
And the second reason was to reflect on the repeating history of, whenever the Greek Empire, when they were at war with the Jews, and now the Roman Empire is at war with the Jews. So it's kind of a symbol against rebellious Jewish uprisings.
Right.
So yeah.
And it's their means of like suppressing any future Jewish revolts as well. So they use the Roman propaganda to suppress any future Jewish people who claim to be the Messiah. Because there were many Jews in first century Palestine that claimed to be the Messiah. Like you have the Simon the Galilean, or Simon the son of Kochbar, right? Simon
Simon
Kochbar, and there were many other figures.
There's an Egyptian figure, a Samaritan figure.
The Egyptian, yeah, and this was even before Isa alayhi salam.
Yeah.
There were many Jews that wanted to be that Messiah that was fulfilled in the Old Testament.
And even like what we were saying just now, like even before the Roman Empire, there was revolts by the Jews where there was like who was the Maccabean that was leading the revolt?
Simeon or something?
Simeon again. So
Simeon.
This is a recurring thing, like you're saying, not just in the period of Isa alayhi salam, but just
history
before as well.
repeats itself.
Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Um,
Do you want to mention about? Sorry, Idriss, did you want to say anything?
I'm just trying to find some certain quotes, and to be honest, I've been struggling.
Yeah, no.
So I'm listening to what you're saying, and what you're both saying.
Okay.
There's one thing here. It's if you bear with me. So this is to do with Justin Martyr and his, I think it's called the First Apology, if I remember rightly, where he talks about that. So supposedly he's writing to the pagan emperor, Roman emperor at the time, and what he does admit is that, and you touched upon this, that Jupiter, was it Jove, if I pronounced that right?
anything related to Jupiter is called Jovian.
Jovian.
Jove.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Jove, Jove. So he's a sun god, and that he admits that Jupiter was supposedly born of a virgin. Jupiter was crucified, died just like Jesus is what he presumes claim. He rose at Jove or Jupiter rose again and ascended to the heavens. And he concedes the fact that there's a lot of similarities, and then also, as you know, Dionysus died, was rose again, ascended to the heavens, and I'm sure you're aware of this because I think we've talked about it in the past. Justin Martyr's reasoning about this is that with God being all knowledgeable, God knew this was going to happen, but then somehow the devil realized what was going to happen with Jesus.
Yeah.
So what the devil did is, before Jesus is coming and the death, the resurrection, the ascendancy and all that, the devil inspired men to have these beliefs in terms of their pagan gods, for them to have the same belief. So when it happened to Jesus, it kind of confuses the situation. That's his way of, that's his rationale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's his argument, rather than saying, well, actually,
He's prophesied in the Old Testament. And
well, he says that as well, but rather than saying, oh, this is just coincidence, that our belief in these main tenets, like, we didn't borrow them from the pagans, we didn't borrow them from the Hellenistic world.
Right.
We didn't,
I'm sorry to say that's not a convincing argument for me.
Oh no, but that's what he says in his. I know, yeah. So, but it just goes to what you were saying, that he was a philosopher. He was not a Christian initially, and he converted. But he was well aware, and others were well aware of the similarities in terms of what you would about Jupiter and that. And that's well, number one, he confesses the similarities, and then also there's a time where, as you know, with the Romans, they would deify their Caesars, their leaders. Yeah. So the actual first Caesar, he gives another example where it says when Caesar died, then they saw him resurrected and then ascend into the heavens.
Ascend to the heavens, yeah.
Yeah, so he uses that as another similarity.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, as you were saying, a lot of parallels that Justin Mark talks about.
And it's interesting, right? Like the ones you mentioned there, how many of them are in our account of Isa alayhi salam in the Quran? None of them. Like it's all about the resurrection, it's about
the virgin birth
the virgin birth only, but like there's so many of these stories that were existing in the Roman Empire around their gods and goddesses that we don't have in our account of Isa alayhi salam, but the Christians have in their Gospels.
Right.
So you touched on some there. We have Hades.
There's another one.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
No.
So, if I'm pronouncing this right, Bacchus.
He's synonymous with Dionysus.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So that was the son of Jupiter, begotten by Jupiter.
Yeah.
As they say, begotten, literally intercourse with Simeon, and that he was, and that basically he was torn to pieces, having died, and he rose again and ascended to the heavens.
Wow.
So he's the son of Jupiter. Yeah.
And Dionysus or Bacchus, he was the god of wine, rebirth, and resurrection.
Yeah, it says
and
divine here.
He's the one that turned water into wine. Where else do we hear about turning water into wine?
In the Gospel.
But we don't have it in the Quranic account of Isa alayhi salam.
That's why it says discoverer of the vine.
That makes sense then.
Interesting.
We also have Hades, Pluto, and Persephone, who are kind of synonymous, and they descend into the underworld and return. In the Quranic account of Isa alayhi salam, we don't have him doing that.
No.
Whereas in the Christian Gospels, we do have a descent into hell and then astaghfirullah and returning. Hercules, he was a mortal who became divine through suffering and heroic deeds. And he also ascends to Olympus and suffered for humanity, and then ascends. Prometheus too, so he's also known as someone who suffered in this Greco Roman world. And then just the last one I wanted to touch on here was Mithras. Yes. So Mithras is more an Eastern figure than a Greco-Roman figure, but he was adopted heavily by the Roman world. And he's also a salvific figure, and there's a lot of imagery around him and ritual meals. So actually there was a Mithraic inscription which read, "He who will not eat of my body and drink of my blood, so that he will be made on with me, and I with him, the same shall not know salvation."
Wow.
So, of course, in the New Testament we have, as a Christian, like every Christian denomination has this, this belief that, they consume the body of their understanding of Jesus.
The Eucharist.
The Eucharist, yeah. We don't have that in the
what's interesting about the Eucharist is that the concept of having the bread and drinking the wine is in the Mosaic law, apparently so in the Torah.
Okay.
So this was a Jewish custom, but they never believed in the concept of having the bread represents flesh and the wine represents blood, because that's cannibalism. Cannibalism is human sacrifice. That's completely abhorrent and completely contradictory to the teachings of the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms. So we could clearly see that this idea of eating flesh and drinking blood completely goes against the teachings of the Prophet.
I think that's when, I don't know who it was. It was either Luther or
Martin Luther King Jr.
no, the original Luther.
Oh, the original Luther.
Or what's the other leader? The other Protestant reformer.
The German one.
Yeah, but help me out, guys.
Oh,
Calvin.
Calvin. Oh no,
Yeah, he's like
not
Swiss.
German.
He's
Swiss.
French.
Yeah. Oh, French.
Well, he might be German.
Luther was German.
Luther was German.
Yeah. Basically, Protestants. I forget the exact term that the Catholics and I believe the Orthodox, because they believe it's the literal flesh and blood.
Orthodox, yeah, they're
Yeah,
extremely.
but the Protestants don't.
The Protestants don't. Okay.
So they realise what you were saying, and in the 1500s or whenever it was, 1600s, they changed their doctrine.
Amazing.
That it's like allegorical, whatever you want to call it.
Because in the Jewish custom, it was for Thanksgiving. It's to praise God, for having the meal.
Yeah.
But Paul made this into, well, we know that. Well, James Tabor, he mentioned in his book, Paul and Jesus, how the apostle transformed Christianity. That the four Gospels has to be read in the light of Pauline theology.
Yeah.
100%.
Because they've been heavily influenced by Pauline theology, and especially in the Gospel of Mark, it does talk about the bread and the bread representing the flesh of Jesus, and the wine is the blood. But it wasn't the words of Jesus; it was the words of whoever's supposed to be Mark. And what's interesting is that a lot of biblical scholars, like James Tabor, said that this cannot be referring to the historical Jesus, because the historical Jesus was a first century Palestinian Jew who still was Torah observant, and for anyone to condone cannibalism in first century Palestine is completely ahistorical.
Yeah, antithetical to what they
It's
stand for.
antithetical towards the teachings of the Torah and the prophets. Yeah.
And actually, James Tabor is a great person to listen to about this.
Yes.
Another interesting, unusual figure that I found in my research was Martin Luther King Jr. So not the Martin Luther, who was one of the founders of Protestantism, but the civil rights champion, Martin Luther King, in more recent times.
Yeah.
The famous black civil rights figure.
I
He
have
was
a dream.
also, he was actually a pastor, right? And he was really high up in the church. And he actually, for his PhD, I believe, he actually looked into this eating the blood, drinking the blood and eating the flesh. And he actually wrote about the links to Mithraism, and that study is available online. So if you guys want to read that, I'd highly recommend it. How he talks about like a lot of this came from Mithraism.
Oh wow!
So he done his PhD in that and his studies in that.
So did he believe in the Eucharist then? Did he believe in the concept of
I'm not too sure, but I think he had quite a liberal view about Christianity.
Martin Luther
King Jr.
King Jr.
Oh, he was
What was
a
it?
serial adulterer, let alone believing in the Eucharist. To
Right.
be honest with you,
Okay.
I don't know if you know, but he was.
I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, no, but there is a study out there.
He did a thesis on that.
Yeah, I believe it was a
what?
thesis, or like the thing that
What about it?
he talked about how it's linked to Mithraism,
Wow.
and he studied Mithraism in
Not
detail.
the Eucharist itself, or the perception that it's really the flesh and the blood. Because the Protestants from day dot, they accepted the Eucharist, but the belief that, I forget there's a term, like I forget there's a term for it.
Transubstantiation.
Something like that, that they believe it is literally the blood and the flesh of
But
Christ.
the Protestants.
kept the Eucharist, but they said it was more symbolic. It wasn't actually consuming the flesh and the blood.
But the Protestants,
Makes sense.
they like changed. They stemmed from the actual literal version, right? Like the literal version was the original version,
it's in the
and then the
gospel-
Protestants they felt
it's in the
slightly
gospel.
embarrassed, and then they shifted away from that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know their rationale, but they took it. They believed that it was it was bidah. For them.
Innovation.
Oh, okay.
It was an innovation.
You know, also another very quickly. There's
Yeah.
another biblical scholar. He's an Anglican priest. His name is. Oh, what's his name again? He wrote a book of the history of the Bible. Yeah,
Is
very
it English?
elderly.
NT right? Oh. NT right? Or?
No, not NT, right. What's his name? Oh, John Barton. John Barton.
Okay.
He's a very well-known professor, Anglican priest, and he wrote a book called The History of the Bible.
Has he
And-
passed? Is that the one that passed?
No, I don't think he's passed away. Dale Martin passed away. Yeah. But I'm talking about John Barton,
Yeah.
and he wrote a book with the a history of the Bible, which I actually highly recommend. It's a very good book. I read parts of it, and he mentioned that when these 4 Gospels were written, the Christians read these 4 Gospels in unison, as though they harmonize each other. But he mentions that they're actually written to replace each other's Gospel.
Wow.
So you have the Gospel of Mark, and then you have the Gospel of Matthew. We know that whoever wrote the Gospel of Mark, we know from textual criticism that we don't know who wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But when we analyze the contents of Mark, his audience was the Romans, yeah? Then you have Matthew that portrays a Jewish version of Jesus. And it's interesting how Matthew copies approximately 85% of Mark's content. And I think Dan Wallace mentioned 600 out of 660 verses from Matthew's Gospel is verbatim from the Gospel of Mark.
Wow.
But whoever wrote Matthew added his own embellishment.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that when it came to the Eucharist part that is mentioned in Mark, Matthew deletes it. And the reason is because
Jewish.
it's Jewish audience.
Yeah.
You see? So what John Barton says is that it's meant to, that whoever wrote Matthew is meant to correct Mark's Gospel. And this was a very common practice in the late antiquity, where you have an existing document, and in modern parlance we would call it plagiarism.
Yeah.
But in the late antiquity, you have a document, but you're correcting that document. So whoever wrote Matthew is correcting Mark's Gospel, and he deleted the Eucharist narrative because that goes against the Jewish narrative.
Yeah. So you're having like these Greco-Roman narratives, Greco-Roman stories being put in and
Yes.
taken out depending on the situation, right?
Yes.
That's,
And it ends
crazy.
with John.
And it ends with John, which has the highest Christology. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
There's, the I am statements and all that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like you mentioned like the Capitol
Yeah.
triad.
Capitoline triad. Yeah.
So actually, it's interesting because a lot of these triads and these kind of figures that in the Roman Empire that they were worshipping, they actually came from surrounding regions that were conquered. So it wasn't like all these gods and goddesses of the Roman Empire were birthed in the Roman
No,
Empire.
they would adopt them.
They would adopt them.
Yeah.
And they would often adopt them from conquered regions, and that was the main source of like their pantheon and the region why these gods existed. So we were giving that example of we were giving this whole historical narrative of Vespasian and the Flavians and them being at war with the Jewish zealots, basically,
Yes.
and them using like Jewish messianic prophecies to justify their role, and the figure of the god Apollo to justify their role. And like people are thinking like, how does this make sense? How does this all come together in one coherent narrative?
Yeah.
Like how does this all link to Christianity? Sure, there's like we've talked about parallels of like gods in Greco-Roman times and Christianity, but they can just say what Brother Idriss mentioned, that it's just it's Satan just whispering into their ears to like cause confusion, this, that, the other. But that doesn't cut it for me. And I don't know if that Christian figure that said that was aware of this, but when the Romans were at war, like we just said, they would conquer these regions and then they would take their gods in. And they wouldn't just take their gods in, they would often syncretize their
Yes,
gods
yes.
with these conquered gods.
Yes.
So-
the Egyptians, didn't they, as well?
Yeah. So I can just list off a rail of like situations where this occurred. So the Etruscans, are you guys familiar with
Yeah.
them? They adopted the
They
Etruscan
were,
triad.
they were prior to Rome itself, the Etruscans.
Okay.
They were an ancient civilization, which then it was the precursor to Rome,
Okay.
the Etruscans.
Interesting.
But yeah, they took from the Etruscan triad, which was one of the main gods in like the main group of gods in the Etruscans. When they went to war, when they started evolving. With Carthage, we all know the wars between Rome and Carthage.
Yes. Yep.
And
What
Brother
are they to
Idriss,
India?
kind of a region where you're from. They took the figure Cybele from the Carthaginians when they were conquered.
Yeah.
With Greece, they took often from the Greek gods. Another, we know about like Rome and Carthage and the battles that they had with, like, for example,
Punic Wars.
the Punic Wars. Another very famous enemy of Rome was the Gauls and the Celts.
Yes.
So
You know what they did to the Gauls? They like killed 1 million,
genocide.
enslaved 1 million.
Yeah.
They mullered them.
Have you heard about the story of like Julius Caesar and Vercingetorix?
There was a battle.
Yeah, where they built the two walls and then they
Yeah.
just slaughtered everyone. Like,
Yeah.
so it was really bloody history, and it wasn't just bloody. They actually like they didn't just like kill them. They also stole their gods. So a really famous example of this is Epona, who was a Celtic horse goddess, and they just took that the goddess, and put it into their pantheon. So it's not like even though they were bloody and even though they were completely at war with these people, the Romans, they didn't hesitate to take these gods. And I can just keep going, like Isis and Serapis, they adopted this into their pantheon. Mithras from the Parthians, so the Parthians were an empire in the Persian region.
Yes.
And as I alluded to earlier, Mithras was not from like the European area, he was from the east, and he was slowly being adopted into the Roman Empire at the same time of Christianity being, when Christianity was rising.
Yeah, it's just Mithraism kicked off about, I think it was about 100 BC in
In
Persia and the Iraq
Parthians.
area. Yeah.
But like, what's interesting, right? I've like listed empires from all around the Roman Empire, all around the world, which they fought and conquered, and I just gave examples everywhere where they adopted gods and goddesses. What's the one exception?
Christianity.
Like, what is the one empire? What is the one region that the Romans are surrounded by or have within their empire that they haven't stolen a god from? The Jews.
Oh, the Jews, yeah, correct.
The Jews, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
And this is
that's
actually
interesting.
noted by
That's interesting.
historians as a very unusual exception. Like, it's highly unusual
Is it
that.
because of the aspect of monotheism?
Yeah, it's the aspect of monotheism potentially. So
if they did adopt it, then they'll have to get rid of it.
yeah, but why? Yeah, they'd have to get rid of their whole setup, right? They'd have to get rid of the whole pantheon. But what's easier, to adopt the Jewish god and just completely revitalize their whole system, or to adopt a figure in Judaism and turn him into a god?
Oh, okay.
So
The latter.
you're the latter, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my understanding, and feel free to challenge me, brothers. But like, the figure of Isa alayhi salam is that is
Yes.
the synchronization that they focused on.
Yes.
And because they already had in their empire, like I gave examples of how they were heavily focusing in on the sun god Apollo, the son of the god Zeus, and that was their main god at the time. So the main god at the time was known as the son of God. And then you have the figure Isa alayhi salam, and in the Old Testament, like, they have this terminology, the son of God,
Sons of God, yeah.
sons of God,
Yeah.
but in a completely different context and a completely different understanding of sons of God. But they chose that figure who's like have stories, myths going around at the time,
Right.
to turn that figure into one of their gods in their pantheon,
Right.
because it was so easy for them. They already had a figure that was very similar.
That feeds exactly to what Justin Martyr was saying.
Yeah.
In terms of the similarity.
Yeah.
And but what it is, very quickly, is that Justin Martyr has concocted an argument that doesn't make sense, like with the devil knowing what was going to happen, and going and starting these mystery religions and whatnot, and causing those similarities. So when Jesus arrives, the similarity already exists. But what Justin Martyr, what's actually happening there is Justin Martyr's making an argument that to the Roman world or the Hellenized world that doesn't make sense in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Do you want to quote Justin Martyr, the verbatim words that
I don't have it all.
it's in Against Apology, chapter 21?
Give me a sec.
Yeah. Because I think that's a very important.
While the brothers find that, I'll just mention. So like I'll give examples of synchronization that was happening in this region, and it's not just with the Romans. It's not like just the thing that the Romans did. It was actually what I mentioned, the Seleucids before.
Yes.
At the same time as the Seleucids, there was the Ptolemaic kingdom, which was also birthed from Alexander,
Egyptian,
but in a different region, and they had a god called Serapis, who was a combination of Greek gods like Dionysus, Helios, and Egyptian gods like Osiris and Apis. So this is a figure called Serapis, who was in the Ptolemaic kingdom, being used as a combination of Greek and Egyptian gods to kind of help integrate the Egyptians into the Greek Empire.
Right.
So it was a common thing throughout history in this region.
So it had a political interest.
Yeah, it had political interest. And how much of a political interest is there when you have a new dynasty that has to justify itself religiously, that is justifying itself religiously by saying the Jewish messiahs, Titus and Vespasian,
Right.
they're at war with the Jews, they're using Apollo-like imagery, they have all the reason in the world from their paradigm to try and integrate, to make the Jewish rebels less extremist.
Exactly.
By saying, listen, that figure that arose in your region, that really famous figure that arose in your region, Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, he was, according to them, they have reason to say that figure actually was an incarnation of our god Apollo.
Stuff.
And another thing, they were looking for a way to kind of, Apollo was very European in his depictions and in his backstory, and they wanted to use Apollo because it was becoming the main god of the Roman Empire.
Yes.
Like I mentioned in the first century, and they have Roman Empire is very diverse. So they were trying to find an excuse or a way to make that god Apollo more universal and to make him the main god. So to make him more Catholic, because Catholic means universal.
Universal, yeah. So is it accurate to say that whoever authored Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are nothing but Roman literary works, and they transformed a messianic figure who wanted to establish the kingdom of God on earth, upholding the Torah, not necessarily agreeing with, like, conforming with the Romans.
Yeah.
And then the Romans, they changed that messianic figure, Isa alayhi salam, into a pacifist, submissive messianic figure. Would you say that?
Yeah, like for me, it's
to sort of suppress any future Jewish revolt.
to me that's the spirit of what's happening. But I do believe, like the New Testament, it was often written by Jews in the diaspora. So Hellenistic Jews in the diaspora. I don't know if it was like under direct like subversion to the Roman court that they were written in, but it was definitely under the pressure and under the like threat of the Roman danger on the Jewish populations, right?
I agree with you.
So that narrative was being shaped whether intentionally by the Roman hierarchy or whether through through threat of force, because the Romans were like genociding the Jews at the time.
Yes.
So they felt like, okay, we need to kind of shift our figure to be like more pacifist,
Right.
because that's what the Romans want. And then people like Justin Martyr later on can be like, you know, this is kind of the same thing. It fits the Roman agenda of like, you know, having a more universal Apollo figure who appeals to the minorities in their region, and it appeals to the Christians that, you know, they get to survive the next day because they're not a threat to Rome. Yeah.
So for me, I think that I said that the Pauline's writings, or at least the authentic letters of Paul, 100% feed into the canonical Gospels.
Absolutely.
Which then means by default, we then have a question: did Paul make this up, or did Paul himself inherit it? I know Bart Ehrman's opinion is Paul inherited these beliefs. He didn't make it up himself. So therefore, if Bart Ehrman's correct in that instance, then with Paul's writings being circa 50, okay, then these beliefs are quite relatively early. So early enough that they predate definitely the Gospels and Paul's writings himself.
Absolutely.
Which I think in that instance then, I think it's a natural...
Yeah.
It was organic.
It was organic.
Yeah.
That belief with the Hellenized Jewish diaspora and others, that these beliefs organically formulated themselves because of the socio-political, religious situation. That's what I think. Potentially, did the Romans, you know, at a later point, realize and play
Promulgate.
more so, potentially.
Yeah.
But I think initially, I think it was an organic.
Initially, yeah. That was already there at the time, and the Romans, it was in their interest to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And not to promote the extremist viewpoint of the Jews according to them, right? So
100%.
Yeah. And just in terms of I think brothers you want to have like another podcast soon on Apollo.
Yeah.
On Paul.
Inshallah.
So I can just quickly wrap up on this, and then if that works. The brothers also touched on like synchronization with story of Isa alayhi salam in the New Testament and the Roman Greco gods. And like, of course, the main god that we've been talking about in this podcast was Apollo. So I'll just give a few more examples to wrap up on the synchronization between him and the depiction of Jesus in the Bible. So we have Apollo was known as the bringer of light and light of this world, which is in either Mark or Matthew as a reference to Jesus.
Light of the world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's in John's Gospel.
John's Gospel, sorry. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
So you see there's a
I'm the light of the world.
yeah. So that kind of terminology was actually used for Apollo originally. He's also known as Slayer of the Serpent of Evil. And you know the depictions of the serpent and how Jesus defeats the serpent in the New Testament. So there's that synchronization there between Apollo and the figure in the New Testament. Just to wrap up quickly, so Apollo is often known as the ram bearer, and I think there's another god. It's not coming to my head now, but
There's too many gods.
yes, too many stuff. But yeah, that where they would have a ram on their shoulder. Mithras had a bull on his shoulder, because he was known often associated with a bull, and Jesus had a lamb on his shoulder in early depictions.
Yeah.
So
Lamb of God,
there's
John.
that synchronization there where they're all kind of being depicted the same way. As I mentioned, in the first 4 centuries of Christianity, it's very hard to, it's almost impossible to see if it's Jesus that's being depicted or if it's Apollo being depicted, Mithras being depicted, Sol Invictus being depicted. You can't tell the difference because they're all being depicted the same way. And then, the more traditional imagery we get of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, according to Christians, from the 4th century onwards is with the beard and the halo and the long hair.
The halo is also...
Yeah, that's from the god Serapis that we were talking about earlier.
Serapis, yeah.
So they're actually depicting very similar to Serapis, who was also a fusion god.
Based in Egypt, right?
So yeah,
Serapis.
Serapis was the fusion of the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods.
The Egyptian gods, yeah.
Yeah, so
apologies, yeah.
so that's
thinking
very.
Egypt as well.
So yeah, that just shows like we've given lots of examples of
Subhanallah.
the synchronization, the absorption of gods, the parallels with gods, and the New Testament. So yeah,
I don't have my glasses, so this is chapter 1. It's analogy to the history of Christ.
I can read it for you.
Yeah, please, bro, if you could.
At the beginning,
Yeah, just the beginning, just all of that, and it just ends
what does it end?
just there.
Oh,
But if you think you reach a point where the point's made about the admission
Okay.
by Justin Martyr, you can end it.
Okay, so this is Justin Martyr's first apology, chapter 21. Yeah, the subtitle, the subheading is analogies to the history of Christ. So Justin Martyr says the following: and when we say also that the Word, who is the first birth of God, was produced without sexual union, and that He, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified and died and rose again, and ascended into heaven, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter. So Justin Martyr is addressing to a pagan audience. Okay, for you know how many sons your esteemed writers ascribe to Jupiter. Mercury, the interpreting word and teacher of all, Aesculapius, who, though he was a great physician, was struck by a thunderbolt, and so ascended to heaven, and Bacchus too, after he had been torn limb from limb, and Hercules, when he had committed himself to the flames to escape his toils, and the sons of Leda, and Dioscuri, and Perseus, son of Denai, and Bellerophon, who, though sprung from mortals, rose to heaven on the horse Pegasus. Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, please.
For what should I say of Ariadne and those who, like her, have been declared to be set among the stars? Wow. And what of the emperors who die among yourselves, whom you deem worthy of deification, and in whose behalf you produce someone who swears he has seen the burning Caesar rise to heaven for the funeral pyre? And what kind of deeds are recorded of each of these reputed sons of Jupiter, it is needless to tell to those who already know. This only shall be said, that they are written for the advantage and encouragement of youthful scholars, for all reckon it an honourable thing to imitate the gods. But far be such a thought concerning the gods from every well-conditioned soul, as to believe that Jupiter himself, the governor and creator of all things, was both a parasite, the son of a parasite, and that being overcome by the love of base and shameful pleasures, he came into Ganymede and those many women whom he had violated. Wow, okay. And that his sons did like actions. But as we said above,
So that's the begotten aspect, isn't it?
wicked devils perpetrated these things, and we have learned that those only are deified who have lived near to God in holiness and virtue. And we believe that those who live wickedly and do not repent are punished in everlasting fire.
So towards the end, that's how he tries to reconcile.
He tries to bring it back, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a clear admission about the parallels, as you've discussed, in there.
And it's interesting, like, a lot of those gods that were referred to aren't even the ones we talked about the whole podcast. So we had Pegasus, we had the Roman deification of the emperors, so that's just further. He's referring to even more material, so he helped us out there.
Can I make 2 points very quickly? The first point, I've heard arguments
Oh yeah, the rebuttals.
of Justin Martyr. I've heard justification of Justin Martyr addressing to the pagans and trying to find a common ground, because I've heard Christians use the argument that at the time of Justin Martyr, they were being persecuted. So to suppress any further persecution, he wanted to find a common ground. With
But that's our
pagans.
point on how the Gospels were written.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So despite that, why would you want to come to common grounds with specific pagan beliefs? That means you've already made admission that the origins of Christianity does have pagan roots. And his opponents even said, well, the very fact you've admitted that there is similarities means that you've resembled our gods, but the difference is that you twisted it. You twisted the narrative. So that justification doesn't sound feasible to me at all. Despite undergoing persecution, Justin Martyr is doing a very good job of demonstrating common grounds with pagans. Okay, not common grounds with pagans regarding like saying that when we try to come to common grounds with
Not based on your deed, like doing good works.
Quote the verse about coming.
Oh, so is it Surah Al-Imran, Surah 3, Ayah 64? قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا. Say, all people of the book, the Jews and Christians, come to common terms as between us and you, that we worship none but Allah, and that we do not associate partners with Him, and that we erect not lords anyone other than Allah. And whosoever turns away from it, then you bear witness that you are Muslim, submitting your will to Allah alone, without associating partners.
So it calls to Tawheed.
Call to Tawheed, because the Jews and the Christians know that the fundamental call of the prophets and messengers, Moses, Jeremiah, all the Hebrew prophets, as well as Jesus himself from the gospel, is the oneness of God, and not worshipping 3 in 1 or 1 in 3. Okay, so in terms of that, we can come to common ground with Jews and Christians, because from the prophetic traditions, from the Hebrew traditions, prophetic traditions like Abraham, Moses, Jesus, they all worship one God. And what we're telling the Christians is, don't follow the religion of church, because the church is what dictated your doctrines. Your doctrine should be based on the teachings of the Torah, the prophets, and the gospel. Right? How can you come to common grounds with pagans? Yeah, pagans who don't accept the oneness of God in the first place. Okay, they're associating partners with God. Right? They're calling to worshipping multiple deities. We know Christians are calling people to shirk, associate partners with Allah. But why can we come to common ground with them? Because prophets were sent to them, revelation was given to them, and then we prove from their own scriptures that your prophets call the oneness of God. But you can't come common grounds with pagans. How can you?
From your position.
From your position.
Yeah. But yeah, subhanAllah. But yeah, that's a brilliant way to wrap it up and bring back everything.
Second point, very quickly. This whole session has been very, very beneficial. I found it very, very beneficial. And I hope the viewers as well, inshallah. The concept of triads, meaning that the worshipping 3 divine entities, is not unique in Christianity. it's found in every ancient civilization.
We referred to multiple ones in the Roman Empire and Greek Empire just now.
Greek Empire.
The Capitoline Triad, the Etruscan
Exactly.
Triad. Yeah.
So the concept of a triad, worshipping three divine entities. Now, for the Christian viewers out there, if you deem these civilizations as pagans and polytheists, if you're going to say Hindus are polytheists because they worship three gods,
The Trimurti.
the Trimurti, three gods, but sharing one essence, the Brahman, what's the difference with your doctrine of the Trinity? There's no difference. The only difference is that Hindus, I heard one Dari speaker's corner, the difference between Hindus and Christians is Hindus worship 330 million gods, you just worship three gods.
Yeah, no, that's literally
But
the difference. Yeah.
it's the same concept.
Yeah.
Just one other thing, if you're interested in reading, if you just go to chapter 22, there's the analogies of the sonship of Christ.
Right.
So it goes into that as well. I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds great. If you want to wrap it up.
Yeah.
No, I think you alhamdulillah, I think it's been done.
Okay.
Generally
Well-
speaking.
Do you want me to wrap up?
Yeah, sure.
Inshallah. So, Jazakallah khair, both of you brothers, for assisting and sharing beneficial knowledge regarding Greco Roman gods and how it infiltrated the religion of Isa alayhi salam by
Through history and
through history by the Romans and the Greeks, and the objective of going through that topic is to really understand the origins of Christianity. I think that's basically the nutshell, and I hope you all found it beneficial. And thank you, brothers. Jazakallah khair. Anything that we said wrong, it's only from ourselves and shaitan. Anything good that we said, we attribute back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So thank you for listening. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.